Relevance of a boy's no. Why is a boy's no very important for his productive and impactful life in the community? Written and read by Mike Ssendikwanawa. Mike Ssendikwanawa is a son to Mr. Kasibante Matthew and Mrs. Kasibante Beatrice, residents of Blenga in Uganda. He is a teacher by profession with a bachelor's degree of science with education biological from Makerere University. He is an author of self-help, motivational and self-improvement books. He has passion for reading, writing and sharing his knowledge with other people. Dedication. I dedicate this book to all boy children aged 13 to 19 years and recommend it as a birthday gift to a boy child in the latter age bracket. Introduction. You are the foundation of the next generation. Therefore, lay firm. What is the purpose of this book? To enable the boy child to develop consent of his inner power of no, so that he draws on it as a means to ensure that he lives a more productive and impactful life in his home community and wherever he goes. Why read this book? Often, guidance has always been provided as a means to ensure that all citizens have harmonious lives in their communities, that is, living at peace with each other, which in turn provides a platform for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly Goal 5 of achieving gender equality and Goal 16 of promoting peace and justice, as well as building effective, accountable and inclusive institutions at all levels. However, there is one outstanding concern, with much emphasis being put to guiding and motivating the girl child, a practice which is okay in a sense of empowering a girl child throughout her different aspirations in life. But what about the boy child? We seem to have kept a blind eye upon his life with the false assumption that he can maneuver throughout life hurdles by himself without any guidance. With the latter said, there is no doubt that despite the relentless girl child guidance there is today, several newspapers, television and other legitimate social media platforms continue to broadcast the real currency of several girl child challenges, say early pregnancies, early marriages, domestic violence and many others, victimizing girls in almost all families, an attribution to the fact that we seem not to address the other source contributing to these challenges, and that is the boy child, to whom I grant the highest percentage as regards the question of who is to be held accountable, irrespective of the fact that both parties, a boy and a girl, have a role to play and blame in creation of these challenges. Therefore, I strongly believe that as we build, guide and empower the girl child, we ought to strive in building, guiding and empowering the boy child too. And for purpose of this book, I put much emphasis on helping the boy child build a strong no within himself, because with a strong no deeply imprinted in his heart and mind, it is to help back up the girl's no as well, thus easing the effort of preventing the two parties from ruining their lives while still at a young age. In due course, this will enable them live productive and impactful lives in their adulthood, since they are the foundation of the next generation and thus ought to lay firm. Chapter 1. No to bad peer influence. Conformity has no problem only if you know when to conform and not to. As a virtue of human nature, we live and learn by associating with others, and for some reasons that creates a desire in one's mind to have belonging to a certain group or peer. But since we are all made of good and bad characters, while in any group, we are prone to falling prey of exposure to bad characters from other group members. Besides, this does not rule out the fact that groups are also important if the members of such a peer focus at emulating and living the distinct good characters from each other. Therefore, the latter and former give a clear meaning of peer influence, that is, it is either a good or bad peer influence. However, just because you want to belong to a group and make friends is not a reason to give in to their terms in case they are misleading you into the wrong direction. Whenever such occurs, it is then that you should employ your power of no and meaning no, because the choice is yours to make, and no one can force you to do what you don't want, most especially if you choose to stick to your no. Occasionally, for the times a boy child has found himself in a mess, he blames his peers having influenced him, yet that peer influence is to a small extent. The large extent is embarked on the strength of his choice to do something or not. However, in order to make this clear, let's dive into the two major categories of peer influence. What are the two categories of peer influence? Though any peer can fall in either of the categories, what it emulates is a choice made by the individuals in that peer. Below are the categories of peer influence. 1. Productive or good peer influence, and 2. Unproductive or bad peer influence. Productive or good peer influence. This is a type of peer influence which occurs when the individuals in a certain peer group focus on productive habits and engage in productive activities. It is this kind of peer that I recommend you to be part of. You only need to choose living a productive life and say no to the unproductive ways of living. Note that it is this peer influence that grows and builds strong men with strong self-esteem, good leadership skills, discipline, and virtues that everyone would want in a person to work with and emulate in society. Values of productive peer influence. For the different peers in schools and home communities, the productive peers are always recognized by certain values which define their way of doing things, way of conducting themselves, how they behave and associate with others. In a school setting, such peers are fond of being disciplined, obedient to all school administrators, teaching and non-teaching staff, prefects, schools, and regulations. Additionally, such peers always endeavor to utilize their time well by engaging in academic discussions, encouraging each other to do research and complete their assignments on time, thus emulating a healthy academic competition. They also counsel, guide, and uplift each other during trying times to ensure that they excel together. They do all these by following the 10 major things candidates should do in order to excel in their final exams, a book by the same author that I recommend you read as well. Values of unproductive peer influence. For the different peers in schools and home communities, the unproductive peers are identified by their values, which define their way of doing things, way of conducting themselves, how they behave and associate with others. Their values are the exact reverse of the productive peers. In a school setting, such peers are fond of being indisciplined, disobedient to school administrators, teaching and non-teaching staff, prefects, schools, and regulations. Such peers are characterized with time wastage through engaging in unproductive activities like gossiping, engaging in non-academic dialogues, belittling and discouraging others from engaging in productive work, thus emulating unhealthy academic competition. Additionally, they also discourage others by belittling their ambitions and aspirations to work towards achieving their set goals. Such peers are fond of teasing and bullying others in several ways, engaging in fights, indecent dressing, and all sorts of indiscipline cases, to mention but a few. So what is the way forward? Having learnt the two categories of peer influence and their corresponding values, note that 1. You cannot look at a group of students or people and confirm that they are productive or unproductive peer. Thus, the influence by your peers is determined by the choice you make as individuals in those peers. To A. Strongly say no to the unproductive or bad character, which may be tempting in desire to belong to a certain peer. B. Choose to emulate the good and productive characters, because it is then that the boy's no gains relevance, since it creates a sounding environment for yourself and other fellow students in order to pursue your academics with minimal or no interruption. 2. Always remember that life has two extremities. Average is not, it has never been, and it will never be one. So that means Your peer cannot be both productively and unproductively influencing. Therefore, you ought to choose saying no to unproductive peer influence in order to always belong to productive peers. Reflection questions on peer influence. From this chapter, No to Bad Peer Influence. Question 1. Make a summary of at least 5 values you would want to emulate in your productive peer at school and your home community. Question 2. Make a summary of at least 10 vices that should commit saying no to in order to realize your dream uninterrupted. Chapter 2. No to indiscipline. There is no excuse for any indiscipline case, but facing the consequences worth it. According to the Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary, indiscipline is defined as lack of discipline, the failure to train oneself in obedience, self-control, skill, etc. There are several forms of indiscipline like teasing, bullying, fighting, indecent dressing, vandalism, to mention but a few. And surely, there is no doubt that they are possibly committed by both male and female students. However, I will group indiscipline into 2 categories basing on what influences it. That is, 1. One self-influenced indiscipline, and 2. Peer-influenced indiscipline. 1. Self-influenced indiscipline. One self-influenced indiscipline is a category where one deliberately fails to control him or herself and thus gives in to disobedience of any form, influenced individually. It occurs when one gets beyond the boundaries of saying no to his or her bad character. This is observed by the way one conducts him or herself before others or in private. Way forward to avoid one's self-influenced indiscipline. 1. Though it is true that we behave the way we were brought up, it is also true that one can choose the way he or she behaves irrespective of his or her home upbringing by deciding to embrace good behavior. 2. Don't give in to self-influenced indiscipline with an excuse that it stems from your home background. You ought to know that there is no excuse for any indiscipline case but facing the consequences worth it, which I believe is not part of your plan to achieve your dream career. 3. Young man, decide today to say no to one self-influenced indiscipline in order to pursue your academics uninterrupted. Peer-influenced indiscipline. In this form of indiscipline, one deliberately fails to control oneself and thus gives in to disobedience of any form as an individual, influenced by his peers, or as a group with the entire peer. It occurs when individuals of a certain peer go beyond the boundaries of saying no to their individual bad or unproductive characters, that they influence each other into engaging in disobedient behavior before others or in private. Way forward to avoid peer-influenced indiscipline. 1. Note that whether you are an individual or a peer group, if you engage in any peer-influenced indiscipline case, there is no excuse but facing the consequences worth that case. 2. You need productive peers to achieve your dream career. Therefore, you ought to strengthen your no, not to give in to unproductive peer influence in order to avoid peer-influenced indiscipline. And with that implemented, you will pursue your dream career uninterrupted. Reflection questions on indiscipline. 1. What is your dream career? 2. For your dream career above, honestly, do you really need to engage in any form of indiscipline as a means to accomplish it? 3. Apart from saying no to indiscipline, list at least 5 guidelines and commit yourself to follow them in order to make your dream become a reality. Chapter 3. No to sexual immorality. Temptation is too human, but not giving in to temptation is a conscious choice. Today, we live in a sandwich of both moral and immoral societies, with the latter sounding more than the former. However, just because there is mushroom growth of immoral ways of living, which are witnessed through indecent dressing in public and on several media platforms as a form of entertainment, social trends through music videos, movies, and miniseries, it is absurd that all these avenues are accessed by almost everyone at their fingertips via the mobile technologies. However, that does not eliminate the fact that a noble and a decent way of living still exists within our societies. It is a matter of choice you're making today, committing to say no to sexual immorality and indecent ways of living. There are several forms of sexual immorality that are stinging society today in the names of international human rights, say homosexuality, masturbation, multi-sexual relationships, to mention but a few. All these are earmarking the source of recurring domestic violence cases and other family-breaking challenges we see today. However, I present to you the great news that you are part of the solution to end all these frustrations. Your sole role is to stand firm by your no whenever you feel tempted to engage in such acts, because temptation is too human, but not giving in to temptation is a conscious choice. Therefore, you ought to note that all these forms of sexual immorality have several life consequences. For instance, trauma, guilt, depression, contraction of sexually transmitted diseases like human papillomavirus (HPV), viral hepatitis B, herpes simplex virus (HSV), human immunodeficiency virus (HIV) and its associated effects, sexually transmitted infections (STIs) like syphilis, gonorrhea, trichomonas, etc., which may later result into loss of one's focus for a better future due to self-condemnation, loss of self-esteem, and interrupted schooling schedule. Nevertheless, there is no doubt that you have to make friends and cooperate with all people irrespective of their gender, male or female. Thus the need to strengthen your no to sexual immorality and make friends of either gender, however, not for sexual gains but rather self-development. This will help you stay focused on your studies and also effectively learn how to work and respect others in society. Note: just like you would not climb a tree beginning with leaves, there is no need to rush into sexual relationships while still in school. Instead, devote your efforts to pursuing your academics first. You will never be late to finding your life partner after graduating in your dream career. However, sometimes you might encounter bad peer influence from other students who might intend to involve you in loose relationships, but I encourage you to stand firm by your no, because if you make that strong decision not to engage in such relationships, no one will force you without your consent. So that means that you have total control over what you choose to engage in or not. Myths and truths about sex. Iconically, there are several myths that you'll hear or have heard already amongst your fellows concerning sex and body orientation. But they are all false ways of influencing others to engage in loose sexual relationships. However, the truth still remains the truth despite the myth spread in society. And in this case, the truth is that you are physically okay. You don't need to engage in early sex or multi-sexual relationships in order to grow into a man. And surely, you will not die, and neither will you grow infertile, because your reproductive fertility or health is naturally determined by the testosterone hormone, which is manufactured within your body in the gonads. It is that hormone, testosterone, which is responsible for the development of various physical characteristics specific to your adulthood as a man. Therefore, if you experience wet dreams, you are okay. There is no problem with you. And if you haven't, that should not worry you. They will come when the time is right for you. Way forward against sexual immorality. Humble piece of advice. In order to strengthen your no to any form of sexual immorality and learn how to cooperate with your fellow students of either gender. I encourage you to take this piece of advice at heart wherever you go. It worked for me, and I hope it will work for you too. 1. Seek God's guidance in all that you do and plan to do. Let your humble prayer be that God grants you the opportunity to make friends with good and productive individuals, and always be mindful of 1 Corinthians chapter 6 verses 18 to 20, which reminds us to flee from sexual immorality. 2. Choose to become a member of NBM and stand by its beliefs. NBM is an acronym for Not Before Marriage, and the belief or creed by its members is do not have sex before marriage. 3. Treat other people's daughters the exact way you will honestly want other boys treat your sisters and daughters in future. Note: other ways on how not to fall victim of sexual immorality are: 1. Being selective on the kind of information you feed your mind through watching, reading, and listening productive information that is aimed at self-encouragement, growth, and development. 2. Seeking guidance from trusted sources like your parents, teachers, religious leaders, healthy personnel, and school counselors concerning sex education in order not to give in to myths about your sex life. However, do seek with a cautious mind to relate all the information you get from them afterwards. 3. Always remember to stand firm by your not sexual immorality, because you have total control over what you choose to engage in or not. 4. And in any case, if you are victimized in any way, seek medical attention, counseling, and promptly take the medication as prescribed by the health personnel. Then commit to saying no in order to brighten up your future, because you still have chance. Author's life reflection on sexual immorality. After my internship from university, I subscribed to a 3-day picnic for youths that was organized and advertised on CBS radio by the Buganda Youths Group, Akezimbira. It was both a visit and a tour to Kalangala Islands with lots of activities to engage in, ranging from physical drills, sports, youth guidance and counseling sessions, to mention but a few. I interacted and learned from several people, made new friends, and learned about the indigenous history of the islands from the tour guides. All went well for the 3 days until we returned from the trip. One of the person I thought we had become friends surprised me with her seductive messaging and requests thereafter. This was a lady who was fit to be my mother by age. However, despite her prompt trickery, I overcame by saying no and meant it, having thought about what would happen if I gave in. How would I feel if I discovered later that I contracted STIs in the due course, yet I had a choice to say no? What was the worst thing that would happen if I didn't give in? Having thought about all those questions and many others, I firmly said no, and the worst that ever happened was losing the friendship. Lesson: there is more to your dear life than giving in to shiny petty material and peanut money that is pledged by people who want to exploit your sex life, yet in turn compromise your life aspirations and health altogether. Therefore, always say no whenever you get exposed to such trials. There is nothing to lose, only to gain. Stick to your no and mean it, because you will have said yes to accomplishing your dreams uninterrupted. Reflection questions on sexual immorality. 1. List at least 4 consequences of sexual immorality. 2. Write a summary of 5 trusted people from whom you should seek legitimate information about sex education. 3. In relation to sex education, what is NBM in full? 4. Write the belief or creed of the NBM members. 5. How do you become a member of the NBM? Chapter 4. No to corruption. Wrong is wrong, even if the majority are doing it. Right is right, even if only a few are doing it. Almost on a daily basis, there are news broadcast via several media platforms such as radios and televisions about cases concerning corruption all over the world. But as several governments in different nations strive to tighten the laws and punishing the culprits, the vice continues to reoccur from one generation to another. However, this does not mean that we should give up and step back with our hands folded as if nothing is happening. In this chapter, I remind you that we, you and I, have all what it takes to end this vice from our home communities. It may not disappear in an overnight, but with consistent action of saying no to its face, gradually it will come to an end just like sunset. Therefore, all we need to do is to embark on the strength of our no, a boy's no, in order to starve it while at a tender age. Just as it is commonly said that small things always tell big things, the rampant rate of corruption broadcast via media stems from the minor ways of our lives and actions that we ignored while still at a young age. Young man, I thus urge you to develop a strong no to any form of unlawful behavior that may be liable to create and feed corrupt behavior into you. Way forward against corruption. You are not corrupt, and surely you should not be. Therefore, 1. Have faith in God and believe in your efforts that you will make it throughout your endeavors. 2. Obey your parents and other community leaders. Listen to them as they guide you about the dangers of corruption in our society. 3. Obey the school rules and regulations because they are not intended to burden your life in school, but rather aimed at grooming you into a holistic person. 4. Choose to say no and stand firm by it against any form of corruption because you are not corrupt and surely you shouldn't be. Author's reflection on corruption. One holiday, I worked with my dad at a construction site. His work was to install electricity in the building, and mine was to help him with the task of carrying the installation pipes, bends and electric wire rolls. Surprisingly, in the evening when our day's work was done, at the time of redressing, I found a 200 shilling coin in my shoes. First, I felt like taking it. Though it was little money, as a student, it would enable me buy some pieces of cassava to eat at the site. But then I curiously thought about how it came into my shoes, yet I didn't have any money at the moment. It must have dropped from someone's clothing amongst the people we shared the dressing room with, I thought. So that's when I strongly said no to the emotional urge of want that was burning in my heart. Astonishingly, on moving out of the dressing room, immediately the supervisor came in asking who had seen his missing 200 shilling coin. "It is right over there. I found it in my shoes," I replied to him. So I was left wondering whether the coin dropped from him by accident or it was intentional. But whatever the case was, I derived the key lesson of saying no to a feeling of corrupt urge, that is, wanting to take what's not yours to satisfy yourself selfishly. Lesson: one bad or wrong act, irrespective of the fact that it is either small or big, can always ruin your good deeds. Imagine if I had given in to take that coin. It was less money that would tempt to think that it won't be noticeable, but it had all the armory to break the trust between me and the supervisors at the construction site. They would have labeled me picky and a thief, but fortunately, with the power of no, I managed to overcome, and all the following days I worked comfortably on the site until we finished our task. Chapter 5. No to materialism. Never be deceived that what you want is always what you need. Throughout all the ages, man desires to acquire and own something for himself. This defines why toddlers cry whenever toys or dolls are taken away from them. The desire to own something for oneself is not bad, because each of us ought to look up for wonderful life experiences. But the trouble lies in having extreme desire to own several things to an extent that the desires of our wants outweighs that of our needs. This extreme desire is what gives birth to a materialistic mindset and a lifestyle of wanting more than we actually need. What's the difference between a need and a want? A need is something that you cannot basically live without for the rest of your life. For example, oxygen, water, and food. But as a student, some of your needs, the things or requirements you cannot study without, are school dues such as books and pens. Whereas a want is something that you would like to have despite the fact that you can live without it. In this case, as a student, these are things or material you can study and excel without. For example, trending shoes and clothes, and any other luxurious commodity you can think of. However, there is no doubt that you need shoes and clothes as a student, but it is not a must that they should be the trending ones. Therefore, not having a trendy cloth or shoe should not negatively influence the progress of your academics, and surely it does not mean that you are not being cared for by your parents or guardians. Besides, you might be thinking, what's the danger in having more for myself? Having material that you want though do not need literally would not be a problem, but the means you go through to attain and accumulate them is what makes the act of being materialistic a vice and not a noble way of life worth living. Thus you ought to say no to it. Dangers of materialism. Materialism bridges one's gap with several indiscipline cases, several forms of immorality, and corrupt behavior in the urge to attain one's wants without paying the genuine price due. However, just like it is emphasized in the previous chapters for the other vices, the vice of materialism too has no power over you if you decide to stand firm by your no to any glitters. After all, not all that glitters is gold. Way forward against materialism. You are not materialistic, and therefore you shouldn't be. 1. The world will present several enticing things or material before you, but the truth is, you don't need all of them, despite the fact that you feel a strong urge to have them. Therefore, always strive to have a balance, so that you reach a point of wanting what you need in order to stand a great chance of achieving your life aspirations. 2. You ought to bear it in mind that for everything you are going to have in life, there is a genuine price you ought to pay. It does not matter whether it is a need or a want. All have price tags attached. 3. If you pay the genuine price due, then you will have the strength to overcome the spirit of materialism. 4. Say no to materialism and firmly stand by your no to anyone who may try to mislead you into unlawful acts due to promises of material rewards. Remember, you have what it takes to overcome the temptation of materialism. All you need is to just say no. Reflection questions on materialism. Basing on the fact that whatever you want is not always what you need, in about 5 minutes, think about your needs and wants in order to pursue your academics uninterrupted. Then, 1. List all the things you want while at school. 2. From your list of wants, identify the key things that you genuinely need in order to pursue academics uninterrupted. 3. For the needs you already have, be thankful to your parents or guardians, and for the ones you don't have, open up to your parents or guardians about the missing needs. Conclusion. I congratulate you upon having read through this book from start to completion. I believe that you've realized and gained the insight of the relevance of a boy's no. However, in order to build a boy's no, it is a question of how strong is the boy's reason why he should have a strong no. But to sum it all, It is to enable him contribute to the creation of and living in an inclusive, more productive and impactful society or community. Nevertheless, young man, you can stand firm by your no, and therefore you will. It is all up to the choice you take right from now. Say no and mean it.